Hey there, welcome to this episode, and as you can see we are diving back into DJ mode again, and we have loaded up a track on channel 1 on our kind of imaginary turntable here, and we've loaded up a track onto channel 2 with our imaginary turntable there, and essentially the SP is in the middle as like our mixer with our faders and our crossfader and stuff like that. So what we want to do is take a look at the buttons now and how we get things going. These two dimly lit pads at the bottom corner here are essentially our tracks. So if we press one of these, our track will start playing. And if I hit it again, it pauses. Now it flashes when it's in pause mode, and it says pause on the screen there, so it gives you a good indication. And it is pausing, it's not taking it back to the beginning, it just simply pauses the track, and if we hit it again, it will continue where we left off. And we can do the same for our other track on the right hand side. And again, it's paused it, it's not stopped and put it back to the beginning. And that's where these next two buttons come into play. And they are what I'd call kind of like the queuing up buttons. And they have like a little rewind icon here, which means that it's going to rewind it back to the beginning of the track, ready to be brought in. So if I hit this now, watch how the icon changes here. It says that it has essentially stopped and that track has gone right back to the beginning, and I can do the same over here. So we can get our tracks right to that beginning downbeat and we can move on from there. Now the other buttons that we have here, we have a couple of queue buttons, and I'm going to get into queuing in a separate episode just because there's a few things to go through. But essentially, we want to listen to our tracks in our headphones because we're queuing up, getting ready to play our set, and we want to know what track we've got ready. Or even picking a new track, we want to be able to queue and listen to that. We can use our queue buttons here to select what we're listening to inside of the headphones. Now, you also have these sync buttons, and these are really cool. So if we look across the top here, our information tells us that our track on the left channel is 120 BPM, and we have the track on the right channel even that is 110 BPM. Now, if we press, it depends on which track we have selected, but if I press sync now here, because these are both sync buttons, if I press sync on this right channel, it is going to sync my BPM to the 120. So you'll notice 110 will change to 120, and it does that vice versa depending on which track you got selected, so you can do it the other way around if you like. But essentially it's brought both of our tracks up now, so if we listen to this one, it should essentially be faster. Because it's now brought that speed up to match, so that when we want to mix them together, it should be a lot easier. So again, we're going to cue this back to the beginning. Just take a look at some of the other functions that we have here. Now, we have these BPM buttons, which are our purple buttons, and we have like a BPM plus and a BPM minus. And what you'll notice, keep an eye on the display here, but as I click up, it goes up in BPM a little bit, and as I click down, it comes down in BPM. And you'll notice because our tracks are synced to each other and they're kind of linked together, it does that to both tracks at exactly the same time. So we're adjusting with one, BPM up or down, depending on which side. We are adjusting the BPM for both tracks at exactly the same time. So that's very handy. If we take sync off and the tracks are now completely independent, when I press my BPM up or my BPM down, you will notice it only affects whichever channel we are, affecting here, pressing our BPMs on. So in this case, the right channel, we can go up or we can come down. I'm assuming that is more if you want to try and do your mixing in a more manual kind of way, and you want to be able to just tweak the BPM, or maybe there's some other reason, maybe throughout a set you want to tweak the BPM a little bit or do something. The possibilities are there because we have these BPM buttons to play around with. So BPM plus, BPM minus, simply speeding up or slowing down a little bit if you like. Then next to those, we have these blue buttons here. And as you'll notice throughout this whole thing, whenever I'm talking about these, although they're separate channels, they are exactly the same. So our button layout is exactly the same. It's not even mirrored like side to side. It's just, our blue buttons are on the left-hand side, purple on the right. But we are kind of divided down the middle. Now, we have the bend buttons. So bend buttons are like a nudge function. So when I learned to DJ, it was like the old school way of actually beat matching and using vinyl. And in order to get things to mix in, you would slow the record down with your finger a little bit sometimes, or nudge it, just speed it up, very small movements. But that way you can keep two tracks together, sort of synced up and, lined up that way. And that is essentially what these buttons do here. So let me play you a bit of a track and just listen to the sound as I press these bend up and down buttons. you can hear how it literally bends that sample, bends the track, and kind of speeds it up a little bit or slows it down. And essentially that's what that's for. Now there are creative things that you could do with that, but essentially that's what those bend buttons are for. They're for making minor adjustments to try and push your two tracks together. And with a bit of practice, I'm assuming it probably wouldn't be too difficult to do it on here. Something that I'm not familiar with because I'm used to the old school thing of vinyl. However, I feel like I understand that, and maybe I could, get used to working with those. So those are the main basic functions on our two channels here. We have the ability to bend and kind of manipulate the samples a little bit. We have the ability to change the BPM. We can sync them and link them together to make our mixing life easier and to get everything to the same BPM and tempo. And we also have things like our cue points here where we can listen to whatever track we want to cue up, our sync buttons to turn off that mixing and matching kind of thing, and also like our kind of beginning cue buttons where I would cue up a track and get it right to the beginning of that track ready to play on the first downbeat. So again, this is kind of stopped in the middle of a track. I want to cue it up and make sure it's right at the beginning. I can hit this pad, and now they're both ready to go right from the beginning. So in the next episode, I'm going to talk about putting two records together, just some very basic mixing fundamentals, and we'll see what happens when we actually mix a track on this thing. Take care, and I'll see you then.